The fire sputtered, its last sparks clawing upward like frightened insects before being swallowed by the dark. Shadows clung to the cabin walls, warping with every flicker of lamplight. She sat rigid on the edge of the bed, her hands twisted together in her lap, her pulse hammering loud enough she feared it would give her away. He stood in the doorway, his bulk blocking what little warmth the fire gave, the storm shrieking behind him as if the wilderness itself had dragged him in. His voice was low, guttural, edged with something primal. "I can smell your fertile," he whispered, and the words struck her chest like a brand. She did not answer. Silence was safer than defiance. His face, half lost in the dark, was carved with scars, each line a story she dared not ask about. The savage mountain man stared at her with a hunger that was not merely of flesh but of possession, as though the storm had delivered her into his keeping. His breath, heavy and raw, fogged in the chill air. He moved a step closer. The floorboards groaned. She felt her throat tighten, the instinct to flee warring against the futility of running. Where would she go? Outside the cabin lay only snow, wind, and certain death. Inside was him. Her mind wandered unbidden to the life before this night. A small homestead, wide skies, the sound of her father's laugh carried on the prairie wind. Then the smoke, the gunshots, her family cut down in minutes by raiders she could still hear in her dreams. She had buried what she could in shallow graves and walked away, swearing never to need another soul again. Yet here she was, cornered by a man as wild as the land itself, a man who spoke as though her very being was written on the air around her. The storm rattled the shutters, and the mountain man's eyes flicked toward the window. He muttered something under his breath, words rough and uneven, as if language itself were a burden he bore reluctantly. When he looked back at her, there was a strange glimmer, something like recognition. She shifted uneasily. His presence pressed against her like the weight of the mountains outside, immovable and inescapable. He tore a strip of dried venison from his belt pouch and tossed it onto the table between them. The meat landed with a dull thud. "Eat," he growled. "Storm won't keep him long." His voice was sharper this time, but behind it lingered a note she could not place. Warning or promise she did not know. Her eyes snapped up. "Them?" she asked before she could stop herself. The question laced with fear, it slipped past her defenses. For a moment, his jaw worked as though he might ignore her. Then he leaned closer, the lamplight catching the ridges of his face, deep lines etched by years of cold, hunger and loss. "Hunters," he said at last. The word hung heavy, final. His gaze burned into her, steady and unyielding. "They come for me. They take you too." Her stomach turned. She wanted to believe this was another cruel trick, but the certainty in his tone left no room for doubt. If others were coming, men ruthless enough to track a beast like him through the wilderness, what chance did she have of surviving them? She reached for the venison with trembling hands, chewing though it tasted of leather and iron. Survival dulled the appetite for taste. It was enough that it kept her alive. As she ate, she studied him, trying to piece together the contradictions. Savage, yes, but not mindless. Dangerous, but not careless. His eyes, though hardened, carried shadows of grief she recognized too well. He leaned back against the doorframe, arms crossed, his silhouette filling the room like a dark sentinel. For all his menace, he had not touched her, had not forced her hand. Not yet. The fire cracked, throwing a burst of sparks that died before reaching the rafters. She swallowed, forcing her voice steady. "If they're coming, why not leave me here? Why keep me at all?" The question was brittle, like ice ready to break. His mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite a snarl. "Alone," he said simply. The word was jagged, torn from someplace deeper than speech. It startled her with its weight, as if loneliness itself had carved him hollow. She stared, unsure what answer he expected, unsure if any answer mattered. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the storm clawing at the roof. She wondered if dawn would ever come, or if time itself had frozen around the cabin. He shifted at last, pushing himself from the doorway. His boots thudded against the floor as he crossed to the far wall. From a peg, he pulled down a rifle, the metal gleaming dull in the firelight. He checked the chamber with a practiced flick, the click of steel loud as a gunshot in the cramped space. Her breath caught. Was this the moment he decided she was more burden than use? But he only leaned the rifle against the table, close enough to remind her of its reach, far enough that she could not hope to grasp it before him. He lowered himself to the floor by the fire, massive frame folding with surprising ease. His gaze fixed on the flames as though searching for something buried within them. Minutes bled into hours. Exhaustion dragged at her, but fear kept her spine rigid. The man did not move except to add another log to the fire, each gesture deliberate, ritualistic. The storm howled, the cabin trembled, and she sat caught in the taut space between predator and prey, between prisoner and guest. When her eyes began to close against her will, his voice cut through the dark, softer now, almost thoughtful. "Tomorrow," he murmured, not looking at her. "They come. You'll see." The words were less warning this time, more inevitability, as if fate itself had been summoned by the storm. She stared at him, at the fire painting his scars in shades of orange and gold, and realized she had stepped into a story with no clear ending. Whether she would walk free or vanish into the wilderness as another whisper on the wind depended not only on him, but on the shadows gathering outside. Thunder cracked above the cabin, rattling the roof beams. The mountain man did not flinch. His eyes flicked toward her once more, unreadable, then back to the fire. She clutched the rough blanket tighter around her shoulders, heart thudding against her ribs, knowing sleep would not come. The storm had locked them together, and when morning broke, nothing would be the same. The last log split, flames leaping high before collapsing into embers. The room dimmed, the dark closing in once again. She drew a breath, sharp and shallow, as the storm pressed harder against the cabin walls. And in that silence she understood. Dawn would bring no peace, only reckoning. Morning broke with no gentleness. The storm had quieted, but its remnants lay heavy on the land, snow thick enough to bury a horse to its hocks. The cabin stood half-drowned in white, smoke rising faint from the chimney like a last breath. She had not slept. When he rose from the hearth, rolling his shoulders like some beast shaking off the cold, her muscles tensed as if she had been running all night. He strapped the rifle to his back and jerked his chin toward the door. "Move," he said. She hesitated, blanket clutched close. The world outside promised only frostbite and endless white, yet something in his tone left no room for defiance. She gathered what little she owned, a scarf, a tin cup, and stepped out. The air stabbed her lungs, sharp and cruel. The snow's glare burned her eyes, a blinding sheet of silence stretching to the horizon. For a moment, she wondered if this was death already. Then came the sound. Faint crunches in the distance, measured, steady. He froze. His head tilted, nostrils flaring like an animal scenting prey. "Hunters," he muttered. The words, spoken last night, carried new weight in daylight. He seized her arm, not roughly, but firmly enough to remind her she had no choice, and dragged her toward the tree line. They ran. Her shoes, city-made and ill-suited, sank with each step. Snow clung to her skirts, dragging her down, while he moved like a creature born from the wild, feet finding purchase where hers only slipped. "Faster!" he barked, though his hand steadied her when she stumbled. Shots cracked behind them, echoes bouncing off the frozen ridges. Her heart slammed against her ribs, each breath a knife in her throat. She thought she might collapse, but fear kept her legs moving when reason said they should fail. They plunged into the forest, pines swallowing them in green shadow. Branches clawed her face, needles raked her skin, yet she followed because there was nowhere else to go. He paused only once, crouching to press his ear against the ground. His hair fell wild around his face, snow melting into strands that clung like frost-woven rope. He listened, then rose. "For men," he said. "Close." His eyes flicked to her, hard as flint. You keep up or you die. Her pride bristled even through her fear. I'm trying, she hissed, voice breaking. He gave no reply, only turned and pushed onward. Hours seemed to collapse into moments, time swallowed by the chase. They crossed a frozen creek, ice groaning beneath their weight, then scrambled up a ridge where the snow thinned to jagged rock. Her lungs burned, legs trembling, but still he urged her on. Behind them, the hunters closed the gap, voices carrying through the trees, laughter sharp as blades. She caught a glimpse once. Dark coats, rifles glinting in sunlight. Men who looked like death dressed for business. When at last they paused, it was in the shelter of a rock overhang. He built a small fire with hands swift and sure, coaxing life from damp wood as if nature bent itself to his will. She collapsed against the stone, chest heaving, every part of her aching. He thrust a strip of jerky toward her. Eat. She glared at him, too tired for politeness. Why? She asked. Why not leave me for them? I'm nothing to you. He studied her across the fire, his eyes reflecting its glow. Nothing dies easy out here, he said. Not even you. The answer, if it was one, chilled her more than the wind. She tore at the jerky with her teeth, each bite bitter, then asked softer. Who are they to you? For the first time, his gaze shifted, as if the question pierced somewhere unguarded. He leaned back, staring into the flames. Men who think the law is theirs, he said. Took from me. Took more than I had to give. They want what's left. She thought of the scars etched across his face, the way loneliness clung to him like a second skin. Perhaps once he had been something other than this. Trapper, husband, father. Now only fragments remained. The thought stirred something unexpected in her. Something dangerously close to pity. Before she could speak again, a branch snapped. His head shot up. The fire hissed as he kicked snow across it, smothering its light. They found us. He seized her wrist, yanking her deeper into the forest. The hunters came fast, their boots crunching over snow, rifles raised. She ducked behind him as bullets spat bark from the trees. He answered with his rifle, each shot deliberate, purposeful. One man fell, cursing into the snow, but 3 more pressed on. She crouched low, hands over her ears, until instinct jolted her into motion. Her fingers brushed against the dead man's revolver lying half-buried nearby. She snatched it up, the cold metal biting her palm. When the next hunter burst through the trees, his face twisted with triumph, she raised the gun. Her hands shook so badly the barrel wavered, but she pulled the trigger anyway. The recoil snapped her wrist, the crack splitting the forest, and the man crumpled mid-step, crimson blooming across his coat. She stared, horror mixing with relief, the weight of what she had done sinking like stone in her chest. The mountain man glanced back, eyes narrowing, then widening with something she did not expect, approval. He gave a curt nod. Good, he said. No more than that. They fought their way out, leaving the bodies cooling in the snow. By the time silence returned, she was trembling so violently she could hardly walk. He guided her to a hollow between trees and pressed her down, keeping watch as dusk fell. Blood stained the snow around them, dark and stark against the white. She could not look away from it. Her stomach twisted, bile burning her throat. Yet beneath the sickness, another feeling stirred, strength. She had saved them both, even if only for a moment. He lowered himself beside her, wincing as he checked a graze across his arm. The firelight from the flint he struck painted his face softer for once, shadows easing. She dared to ask, voice raw. Why did you keep me alive? His eyes lifted, unreadable, yet no mockery lay there. Because you're not weak, he said. Then he looked away, busying himself with the fire. She wanted to press him to demand more, but exhaustion smothered her questions. Her hands still shook, the memory of the gun's kick lingering in her bones. She thought of the man she had killed, the blood that would never wash from her memory, and yet a small, unwelcome pride flickered inside her. The mountain man lay back against a fallen log, rifle across his chest. His breathing slowed, though his eyes never fully closed. She curled near the fire, heat licking her skin, the night vast and unforgiving beyond its glow. As sleep threatened to drag her under, she heard him whisper, almost too soft to catch, "You smell like her." Her eyes opened, confusion sharp, but he said no more. His gaze was lost in the flames, haunted, as though speaking not to her but to a ghost only he could see. She lay awake, staring at him, torn between fear and something stranger, something binding her closer with every mile of this deadly escape. Dawn would come again, and with it, the hunt. Dawn crept pale and brittle through the pines, staining the snow with hues of ash and frost. She woke stiff, the cold seeping into her bones despite the fire's dying embers. The mountain man was already awake, crouched by a stream that cut through the clearing, washing the dried blood from his arm. His movements were efficient, almost ritualistic, but the lines carved deep into his face betrayed fatigue. She sat up slowly, her joints aching, her mind replaying the shot she had fired, the man's body collapsing in a heap. The memory was a weight she could neither drop nor fully carry. When he returned, his rifle slung across his back. His eyes scanned her with a soldier's precision. "We move," he said simply. She gathered her meager belongings, fingers clumsy from the cold, and followed. Snow clung stubborn to her hem, but her steps, though weary, did not falter as they once had. The wild was beginning to shape her stride, carving resolve where fear had once lived. The forest thinned by midday, yielding to rolling hills, and a valley stretched wide under a weak sun. Smoke rose from chimneys in the distance, thin trails curling skyward like fragile promises. Settlement. She halted, heart hammering. Civilization meant safety, meant law, meant freedom. Yet a quick glance at the mountain man silenced that hope. His jaw tightened. His shoulders stiffened as though chains had been thrown over him. "You know this place," she said carefully. He didn't answer at first. His eyes scanned the valley with the same suspicion a wolf might grant a trap. Finally he muttered, "Iron Creek." The name came rough, coated in dust and memory. Should have burned it long ago. Her chest tightened at his tone. What happened here? His gaze lingered on the distant rooftops. "They took my land, took my blood. Sheriff wears their colors. The rest keep their silence." He looked at her then, eyes hard as granite. "If we go in, you keep your tongue. Don't speak my name." Fear and curiosity tangled within her. She wanted to demand answers, to tear the rest of the story from him, but his expression carved a wall she could not scale. She swallowed her questions and followed as he descended into the valley. The settlement greeted them with cautious stares. Men paused with axes half sunk into wood. Women froze mid-step. Children peered from behind skirts. Whispers spread like dry grass catching flame. She felt the air change, charged with unease. The mountain man walked through it with steady strides, but she could see the way his hand never strayed far from the rifle at his side. Inside the saloon, heat and noise pressed in at once. Lanterns swung overhead, casting golden light across faces that turned sharply as they entered. The barkeep froze mid-polish, eyes narrowing. A man at the poker table muttered a curse. One by one, chairs scraped, boots shifted, a circle of tension tightening around them. "Didn't think you'd crawl back, Butcher," a voice called from the bar. The word sliced through the air. Butcher. She felt it cut into her as well, though it was not hers to bear. The mountain man's jaw worked, but his voice stayed level. "I didn't come for you." Laughter rippled, bitter and sharp. A tall figure pushed from the shadows, a badge gleaming on his chest. The sheriff. His rifle rested casual in his hands, but his eyes were loaded, cold and hungry. "You should have stayed buried in those hills," he said. His gaze slid toward her, lingering too long. "And who's this? Another poor soul caught in your madness." Her pulse thudded. She wanted to step back, to vanish into the floorboards, but the mountain man shifted, half in front of her, a wall of flesh and fury. "She's not yours to look at," he said. The sheriff smirked, but the room had gone still, waiting. She realized then the danger was not just in the guns at their hips but in the choice laid bare before her. She could step forward, denounce the savage who dragged her through the snow, side with the law, beg for sanctuary. Or she could remain at his side, tangled in the shadow of his sins, whatever they were. Her throat burned with words she could not say. The silence pressed heavier than gunpowder. At last, the sheriff tilted his head. "You want to live, girl, you walk away now. Tell the truth, and you'll be free." His eyes gleamed with certainty, as though he had already won. She glanced at the mountain man. His eyes found hers, unblinking, fierce, yet beneath the fire lay something raw, an unspoken plea. Not for forgiveness, not even for loyalty, but for belief. Her breath caught, the saloon fading around her. For a heartbeat, she saw not the savage but the man who had pulled her through the storm, who had shielded her from bullets, who had whispered of hunters in the night. She saw grief carved deeper than any scar. Her voice trembled, but she forced it out. "I won't leave him." The sheriff's smile vanished. His rifle rose in the same instant the mountain man's hand closed on his own. The room bristled, air taut as a drawn bowstring. "Then you've chosen," the sheriff said, his voice like a coffin lid closing. The mountain man shifted, his body tense, every line of him prepared for blood. She stood frozen at his side, knowing she had bound herself to his fate, whatever storm it brought. The saloon doors burst open. Snow swirled in, and with it the rest of the hunters, faces hard, rifles gleaming. Their boots struck the floorboards like a drumbeat of doom. The sheriff's grin returned, colder than before. "Looks like the past finally caught up." The mountain man growled low in his throat, the sound primal, furious. His hand flexed around his rifle. Her pulse quickened, the choice she had made burning her from the inside out. The air cracked with silence, brittle and ready to shatter. Somewhere outside, a wolf howled across the frozen hills, and she knew nothing would ever be the same. The room exploded into motion. Gunfire cracked like lightning, wood splintered, glasses shattered. She dropped to the floor instinctively, the roar of bullets splitting the air above her head. The mountain man stood firm, rifle braced against his shoulder, each shot precise, deliberate, as if every trigger pull carried the weight of years. Men fell, tables toppled, smoke coiled thick, choking the lamplight until the saloon became a blur of fire and shadow. She crawled across the floorboards, her palms raw from splinters, heart thrumming in her ears. A body slumped nearby, pistol still warm in its grasp. She seized it, forcing her trembling hand to steady. Rising just enough to see, she fired at a figure looming behind the mountain man. The man dropped before he could aim, his rifle clattering against the wall. The mountain man glanced over his shoulder at her, eyes burning, not with surprise but recognition. She was no longer merely surviving, she was fighting beside him. The sheriff's voice cut through the chaos. "Don't waste your bullets on that animal. Bring him down." His silhouette loomed through the smoke, calm amidst the storm, rifle raised with a hunter's patience. The mountain man snarled and surged forward, knocking aside another foe, his massive frame moving like a storm-given flesh. She followed, the pistol jerking in her grip with each shot, every squeeze of the trigger shattering another piece of the girl she had once been. But the hunters were too many. For every man who fell, two more stepped through the door, boots grinding over bodies, faces set with merciless resolve. The air grew thick with smoke and screams. The saloon transformed into a battlefield. Then she saw it, the sheriff aiming, his rifle steady, the barrel glinting with firelight. She shouted, but the shot rang before the word left her mouth. The mountain man staggered, blood blooming across his chest like ink spilled on parchment. He did not fall at once. He turned, expression fierce even as pain tore through him, and fired back. The sheriff's hat flew from his head, blood spraying as he collapsed into the wreckage of broken tables. The room froze in that instant, the hunters faltering, the fight draining from them as their leader lay still. The mountain man swayed, his rifle slipping from his hands. She rushed to him, catching his arm, though his weight nearly dragged her down. His breath rattled, shallow and broken, but his eyes locked on hers, fierce even in fading light. "You, stronger than you think," he whispered, blood painting his lips. His hand, heavy and calloused, pressed against hers, smearing red across her skin as though sealing a vow. "Don't let them tame you." Her throat clenched, words failing. He gave her the ghost of a smile, something almost tender, then exhaled a final, shuddering breath. His body sagged, heavy, final. The room seemed to tilt, sound retreating until all she heard was the crackle of a dying fire and her own ragged breaths. The hunters, those who lived, backed away, exchanging uneasy glances. Without the sheriff, without their prize, the fight had lost its meaning. One by one, they slipped into the storm, leaving bodies cooling in the blood-stained snow. She knelt in the wreckage, the mountain man's weight across her lap, tears burning but refusing to fall. When at last she rose, she did so with a steadiness that surprised her. She dragged his body through the snow, each step a battle, until she reached the pine ridge above the valley. There, with hands numb and heart raw, she dug into the frozen ground. The grave was shallow, but it was enough. She laid him down, pressing his hunting knife into the earth as a marker, the blade gleaming against the snow like a promise. The wind howled through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and smoke. She stood over the grave, shoulders squared, not broken but reforged. She thought of the girl she had been, the one who clung to fear, who prayed for safety. That girl lay buried as surely as the man beneath the pine. She turned toward the horizon, the wilderness sprawling endless and untamed. Civilization lay behind her, but she did not move toward it. The wild called, raw and unyielding, and she understood now that it was hers as much as his. She walked to the edge of the ridge, the revolver heavy at her hip, the world vast before her. As she mounted the sheriff's abandoned horse, she looked back one final time at the grave. "Rest now," she whispered, voice carried off by the wind. "I'll carry what you couldn't." The horse snorted, pawing at the snow, eager to run. She pulled the reins, guiding it forward. Behind her, Iron Creek smoldered, the echoes of violence fading into the hills. Ahead, the wilderness stretched wide, unbroken. She urged the horse on, the sound of hooves thundering across frozen ground. From the distance, wolves answered, their cries sharp and wild against the empty sky. She did not flinch at the sound. Instead, she straightened, her eyes set on the horizon, heart steady. She had survived the storm, the hunters, the savage who had become her shield. Now she would survive the rest, not as prey but as something new, something untamed. And as the wind carried her onward, a voice seemed to linger in the silence, low and rough, as though the mountains themselves whispered it. "Don't let them tame you." The story did not end here. It had only begun. "If this tale stirred something in you," the narrator's voice murmured, breaking the silence like a hand on the reader's shoulder, "don't forget to share it. Like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments, what would you have chosen?